Okay, so for this lecture, I'm just going to go over some of the things that we talked about in that first set of weeks, just as a general overview of what we're doing when we're talking about economics. We're also trying a new chalkboard method, so we'll see how this works. Okay, economics system, right? It's a way of organizing the production and the distribution of goods and services. Okay, so that when we're talking about a different economic system, that's all that we're doing, okay? I.e., right, how a society solves the production and allocation problem, right? So the production, what we're making, and the distribution, who gets it? Okay. That's fine. So when we were talking about economic systems, this is loud a little, yeah? That's okay. Okay, great. So when we're talking about economic systems, in particular, the economic system that we're most concerned with is capitalism, right? So that's the one that we live in dominantly now. So the way that capitalism solves the problem of production and allocation is through a system of institutions, right? And the particular institutions, capitalism, it's a little groovy, okay, are private property, markets, and firms, right? Okay, so when we talk about private property, we're talking about, there you go. Just taking our time. When we're talking about private property, it's pretty straightforward. Things owned by people, right? But the other part about private property is it's things owned by people. In particular, the ownership of those things is enforced by political and legal institutions. So on top of the markets, firms, and private property, we also have political and legal institutions that work to enforce the institutions that facilitate what's get made and who gets what. Okay, cool. On top of that, we've got, because I don't want to teach this, our markets. Market should be a little bit familiar too. They're a method of transferring goods and services where exchange is voluntary, reciprocal, and competitive, right? So we talked about those a little bit more, what it means to be voluntary, reciprocal, and competitive. The voluntary means that nobody is exchanging anything that they don't want to. No one's being coerced into exchange. The reciprocal, that means that if I sell you this push pin, I get usually money in exchange for it, right? So that's the nature of reciprocal. And that is competitive, which in this case, competitive means that there are many push pin suppliers. You don't have to come to me if you don't like my prices or if you don't like the quality of my push pins. Right, so that's how our markets function. Okay, that's fine. And then as regards firms, where am I? As regards firms, we're concerned about how the stuff gets produced. So our production is going to be organized by privately owned capital goods completed by laborers earning a wage to make a profit. Okay, it's a mouthful. But what that really means is that the decision of what to make is made by the owners of the capital goods. So when we think about capital goods, those are the things that we use in order to make commodities. And commodities are goods and services produced for the sake of making a profit. So the thing about what we choose to produce, so the question of production, how we use our resources, is centered around what can be made for a profit. We don't make stuff because it's nice or because we like making it. I mean, and that's like broadly not, like this is a broad statement, right? Because we do make some things. Some people make art because they really enjoy making it. Some people make medicines because they want to heal people, right? But in general, the dominant framework of the way stuff gets made on the whole, and accounting for the most of our gross domestic product, our GDP, is because it's profitable, right? So commodities are made for the sake of making a profit. Capital goods are just the types of things that are used to make commodities. So commodities are things like, right, that push pin, my sweater, my glasses. But if I use like a screwdriver or something in order to make another machine that I can sell, or in order to make another set of glasses, or if I have a screwdriver, right, to tighten all the screws on my glasses, then the screwdriver becomes sort of a capital good because it's made to create more. It's made to create more things that we can sell also for a profit. Okay, so what am I saying? The difference between a commodity and a capital good. A commodity is something that I sell for a profit. A capital good is something that I use to make something that I can sell for a profit. Difference. Okay, cool. So, right. The important part here, and I'm going to talk about in a second, is that the decision of what gets made, it happens by the firms. The firms only make something if it can make a profit. Okay, then once that something is made, who the owners of the capital goods are the ones who own the commodities. So a big company makes a lot of glasses. It's the company owners who own the glasses, not the people who work the machines or use the screwdriver to tighten the glasses. It's the people who own the company who own the glasses, right? The way that the people who made the glasses use the screwdriver get to own things like glasses and etc. Is through the markets, right? They give their money in order to procure those goods, and they receive this money by working at firms, right? So firms are the production organized by privately owned capital goods, completed by laborers, that's people who are going to buy things, earning a wage in order to make a profit, right? Okay, so the characteristics of what makes capitalism, or what distinguishes capitalism from other potential economic systems, is that it solves its production and allocation problems using these three institutions: private property, markets, and firms. Those institutions are enforced by other political and legal institutions. And what it means is we have a tendency to produce things that can make a profit and not produce as much of things that are unprofitable, regardless of their other virtues. Okay, so the next part of what distinguishes capitalism, what distinguishes capitalism in terms of the output of what it actually does. I want to take you back to, we did this very so briefly earlier on in the semester. This one I missed. Well, no, I'm not. Is perfect. So for a long time, we did this process and firms were creating goods and they were making stuff. And in order to be able to continue to make the same amount of stuff in the future, they had to produce what is considered, the necessary cost. And the necessary cost is the cost of labor and materials in order to create that thing, right? So if we made a metric ton worth of glasses, and it cost this much to buy the materials, and it cost this much to buy the labor, and this is the total amount that we received for selling all of those glasses, that means we can do the same thing again. If we make less than the necessary costs, we won't be able to make as much, because this is how much it takes in labor and materials in order to make this much glasses, right? So if we can stay and maintain roughly around this, we can do what we're doing right now over and over again. If we want to grow, however, and this goes to our GDP conversation, if we want to grow, do more, we're going to have to make more with the same. So our labor and our wage costs didn't change, but we need to somehow make this whole total product bar bigger, right? And so that's where capitalism comes in. It only makes goods that are successful at creating more than the cost to produce them. Okay, so this is a real trick. How do you make more than what was put into production? I mean, thinking back to like labor theory or value stuff, it's like a little abstract. So I only have this much materials, I only have this much labor, but what I've made is somehow bigger. And there's two ways in general of making profit. One way is profit on, oh no, what is it? Okay, there's two ways of making profit. One way that we might make profit is by, just like I just did, somehow growing our bar. So when we talk about like big innovations, like the spinning jenny or the steam engine, it suddenly makes us much more productive. So we're using the same amount of materials and the same amount of labor, but we're able to accomplish a lot more with that same amount of inputs. So that's one way that we can grow. And because capitalism we are only investing in the types of things that can make this profit, those types of endeavors are going to be pursued more often. The other way that we can make profit is profit on transfer. And a profit on transfer is a way that we don't actually make any more than we presently have. Right, what are we doing here? There we go. Well, where were we before? We were here, and we were here. Yeah, okay, we were there, great. Okay, so this is where we were. We made a little bit of profit, and we're trying to figure out how to make more. Well, one way we can do it is by growing the whole total product bar. Another way that we can do it is by taking out some of the cost of production, and generally done from wages. So the way that we can grow our profit is by shrinking our wage costs, right? Remember that this is when we were talking about how capitalism can coexist with other different economic systems, and generally we don't have one economic system going at a time. So having slavery where people are not working for wages can depress your labor costs quite a lot, which makes much more room for profit, much more able to invest. Right. Good. So what did we do here? The necessary cost is what we need to produce in order to create the same amount of production. If we want to grow, we've got to have profit, because if we're only making enough to cover the cost of wages and materials, then we'll never have more, right? So we can do it one of two ways. We can either innovate, make something new, or we can just take some of what is owed to labor or materials potentially, and attribute it to profit. And then this gets to be reinvested into new production processes. If you imagine that this plus is going to create the necessary cost of some other production process, right? So we get to take this divvy this up potentially into wages and material costs, and that gets to grow a whole nother total product bar of its own. Okay, but the thing that keeps it going is this constant paying less to wages than what it actually is owed. So that's the summary of what capitalism is and what it is doing. I would suggest that If you have questions on any of this, go back through it. Ignore the difficulties of the paper, or don't, and comment in the discussion board for week 8. There's not a separate one for week 9, so anything about this review week or about midterm stuff can all go into week 8 and counts towards your week 8 discussion board points. Oh wait, it's